Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this video, it's going to be all about one-hit wonders. And typically when we hear the phrase one-hit wonders, we're talking about music. So we're talking about bands and artists that release either like one album or like a number one hit that just blew up and everyone loved this album or everyone loved this song. And they got really big for like a year. And then they just fell off the face of the earth, or no one cared after that, either because they released that one song or that one album, and then they didn't do anything else, and everyone's just like, I wonder what happened to them. They're kind of a one-hit wonder, or they try to recapture that same popularity, that same like lightning in a bottle that they did with that one album or song. And they keep releasing new music every year, but people just don't like it as much. Kind of like Devo. They did Whip It. Everyone knows that song. Dun, 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 dun. Everyone knows that song. But no one, and I mean no one, can name another Devo song. That is the definition of a one-hit wonder. Let me flip it back around here. So for one-hit wonders, I'm now talking about books. And of course, this is very subjective. They're not really one-hit wonders because, a lot of these authors have released more than one book. I'm just talking for me. These are all books by authors that I've either only read one book by them or I've only enjoyed one book by them. And like I said, this is subjective, A lot of these authors have written multiple books. In some cases, they've only written a few books, though. And we'll go over some of those. But yeah, these are all books that just are written by authors, and I've only either read one of their books or I've only enjoyed one of their books. And all of these books I love. They're some of my favorite books of all time. And some of these are newer books that I've read this year that I absolutely fell in love with. But basically, they're the only book that I like by the author, apparently I can't talk today. They're the only book that I read by the author, or they're the only book that I enjoy by the author. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's go ahead and start with some classics. We're going to go with one of my all-time favorite classics, which is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. It's a classic for a reason. It touches on a lot of good and important themes about race and just what it means to be a decent human being. And it's just a very compelling story. It's written very well. And I know Harper Lee wrote a sequel to this that was not well received. I have not read it. Like I've said, I've heard mixed things about it. I heard it's not very good. And honestly, I don't know if Harper Lee has written anything else besides those two books. So really, this is a pretty good definition of one-hit wonder. A lot of people have read this book. A lot of people love it. And then Harper Lee just didn't write anything after that for a long time. And then the book that, Harper Lee did write, not a lot of people liked it. But yeah, this is a classic for a reason, one of my all-time favorite books, and definitely a one-hit wonder. Another classic that is a one-hit wonder for me would be Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. Now, in this instance, this is the only Daniel Keyes book that I've read, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. I'd probably put it in my top 20, are my top 25. I absolutely love it. And I'm not quite sure if Daniel Keyes has written anything else. I've never really heard of any other books by Daniel Keyes. So I'm sure he's written more stuff, but this is the only one I've ever heard of by him. And I'm fairly confident that if he has written other stuff, this is probably easily his most famous and what he's known for. So again, another one-hit wonder. Fantastic, just very sad and depressing sci-fi book that's just incredible. Another good example of a one-hit wonder for me, probably not for a lot of people, but Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. A top 10 book for me, easily one of the best horror books I've ever read. But he has another very famous story, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which I have never read, but a lot of people say that they read it in high school and they loved it. And then they were very surprised to see that he wrote a 700-page horror novel. And I would agree, because that's a weird that's a weird turn to take. But for me, I absolutely love this book. And as far as I know, it's the only 2 books that he's written. And honestly, I'm not at all interested in reading The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Not really. Maybe if I read it in high school, I would have enjoyed it, but it just doesn't sound very appealing to me right now in my life. And like I said, top 10 book for me. One of the best books I've ever read. And it's definitely a one-hit wonder, because I'm not going to read his other book. There's also a few one-hit wonders for me that, I've only read one book by a particular author, and I'm not entirely sure if they've written anything else. A good example of that would be A Simple Favor by Darcy Bell. I know this is her first novel. I'm entirely unaware of if she's written anything else after this. But what I do know is that this was a very fun and exciting thriller of a book. One of the best thrillers that I've ever read. Almost sort of a black comedy. It's a very funny book, but it also gets very dark at times. Very intriguing. And like I said, I don't know if she's written anything else. If anyone knows, please leave it down in the comments and I'll go check out her other stuff. But for right now, it's definitely a one-hit wonder. The same can be said of one of my newer favorite books that I read this year, which would be The Push by Ashley Algernon. I am completely unaware if she's written anything else. It's the only book I've read by her. As far as I know, it's her only book, but, like I said, I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to this particular author. All I do know is that this is an outstanding book. It's one of the rare books that actually makes me, it just took my heart and just ripped it out of my chest. And yeah, it's very, very depressing. But also it's very well written, very compelling characters, just outstanding, and a one-hit wonder because I don't know if she's written anything else. Now here's another case, sort of like Imaginary Friend, where I know this author is very well known for having written a book that came out years ago that a lot of people like. I didn't like it. I DNF'd it. But her newer book, Perinissi by Susanna Clarke, I absolutely loved this book. This book was such a fresh breath of air, very, very uniquely told, and I jumped into this pretty much blind. I really didn't know what was happening at first, or what was going on, or what was going to happen. And I was very much pleasantly surprised by this book. And like I said, it was a surprise because I tried reading her other pretty much magnum opus of a book, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I got like halfway through that chunky ass book, and I DNF'd it, and it was well written, just like this book. It was just way too long and overdrawn, and just, yeah. I mean, you guys know how much I don't like long books for the most part. Like, I love Sanderson, right? But I don't like when books feel unnecessarily long. And that was definitely the case with that book. But with this book, pretty short. It's like 200 pages, and it's exactly the length it needed to be to tell the story she wanted to tell. And I love this book. Honestly, I don't know if she's written anything else besides those two books. Maybe. But if she has, I'll check it out. But for right now, she's a one-hit wonder because I love this book and I don't like her other book. Along those same lines as Perinissi by Susanna Clarke, Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. This is one of my all-time favorite thrillers. It's such a tense book, and it got such a visceral reaction out of me because I hated the antagonist in this story so much. With a fiery passion, I wanted to like jump into the book and just destroy this man. But yeah, this book was incredible. But I also read another book that she wrote after this called The Breakdown. And that book was so boring and just, it was nowhere near on the level of this book. The Breakdown was very just bland, and like the twist that happened, you're like, yeah, we knew what the twist was 200 pages ago. Like, this is so dumb. But this book is incredible, and it's very well written, great character work, and sort of how the characters get out of their situation is very cool. But yeah, and she has other books that I'm willing to give a try, but I just have a feeling that none of them are going to live up to the greatness that is Behind Closed Doors. So I have a feeling it will stay a one-hit wonder. Another one-hit wonder for me would be The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchinson. This is the first book in a quartet of books, and I'm not quite sure what the series is called. It might just be called the Butterfly Garden series. I don't know, but this first book was tremendous, and it's got great character work. It's one of the most disturbing horror novels I've ever read, so it's very good. But the way it ends has me confused as to why this needed to be in a series and how there's 3 more books left in the series. And I'll be honest, I'm not very interested in reading the rest of the series. And I've heard from a few people that the series just kind of goes downhill in quality from this first book. So I'm probably not going to continue. And I'm also unaware of anything else that this author has written. I don't know if she's written other series or other standalones. So for right now, this is definitely a one-hit wonder. Very good, dark and disturbing horror novel. One of the more surprising one-hit wonders for me, I went into this book not expecting to like it, but I ended up loving it. Probably a top 20 book for me all time. And that would be The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. And obviously I'm more in the vein of reading fantasy, horror, sci-fi, mysteries and thrillers. So for me to give praise to a young adult romance makes no sense, probably for a lot of people, but honestly, it's one of the best books that I've ever read, and I'm not quite sure if I want to try any more John Green, if I'm being honest. I don't know. I'm very torn because I loved this book, so you would think there would be a good chance of me enjoying some of his other works. I don't know. I just have a bad feeling. I think I'm probably just going to stick with this book because, like I said, I loved this book, and I'm just very, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe I should go read some of his other works. But for right now, it's a one-hit wonder, and yeah, I love this book. These next two books are one-hit wonders, just for the fact that they're the only books that I've read by these particular authors, but they're books that I think will change over time. They probably won't be one-hit wonders for long, because I do know that they have more books available to read, and so I do eventually want to give them another shot, and I'm pretty sure they're not going to stay one-hit wonders. But for me, that's going to be The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins, and a recent read of mine, Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. These two books are incredible. This, The Wife Upstairs, is a very good thriller with one of my favorite female protagonists that I've ever read. Sometimes when you read a thriller, the protagonist can be kind of bland, just to kind of, to get the reader to like insert themselves into the story. But, the main protagonist that we get here is anything but bland. She's fiery, she knows what she wants, and she gets it, and then eventually she has to deal with some crazy stuff that happens, and the story itself is just very compelling. And I think it's supposed to be a retelling, or a loose retelling, of Jane Eyre, I think. I could be getting that wrong. But either way, this was an incredible story, and I do know that Rachel Hawkins has written other stuff. So I do want to give her another shot. But until then, it's technically a one-hit wonder, because it's the only book I've read by her. Uh-oh. And then, of course, same thing with Razorblade Tears. I know that this author has at least one or two other books that they've written in the past few years. And this book was, while it was very depressing, it was very well written. Very well written. And I'm very interested to see what this author can bring to a different story and different set of characters. And I have a pretty good feeling that this author is not going to be a one-hit wonder for me. I'm pretty confident. All right, so those are most, if not all, of the books that I would consider to be one-hit wonders. Books or authors that I've read only one book by, and they're the only books that I've read by them, and they're the only books that I love by them. And for some of these, I'm pretty sure they're going to stay that way because they've written very few books, or I'm just not interested in reading their other stuff. Other authors, could definitely change if they write more stuff, or if I read any of their previous or other works. I could definitely see this dwindling down into a very shorter list of one-hit wonders. And maybe this will be an interesting video to come back to in a year's time when I try to, because I always like to try out new authors and new genres. So I'm sure that, if I try out new authors and if I go back and read some more books by the authors that I mentioned in this video, I'm sure that in a year's time, this video would be very different. And I think that would be an interesting experiment. So I'll mark the date, and in a year's time, I will make this exact video and I'll see if it changes at all. If I'm still on BookTube, hopefully, I am, because I'm having a lot of fun doing BookTube and getting to know a lot of booktubers and just chatting about books. It's very fun. Anyway, please let me know what you guys thought of the books that I mentioned in this video. Let me know if you liked them. Let me know if you hated them. What are your one-hit wonders? What are books that you've read by authors that you've only read one book by them and you absolutely love them, and it's either the only book you've read by them or the only book that you absolutely love by them? Please let me know down in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching and have a terrific day.